Hi guys, hope you're all keeping safe and well. Welcome to another episode of Brown Carguy and Buddies. Although this one's a little bit different because this was initiated more by a good friend of mine, Farrukh Ahmed, based in the UAE, and he does a podcast and he's got his own channel. I'll put all his links below in the description, so go check him out. And he does podcasts. His content is about is more about being inspirational and motivational and I don't know why he wants to talk to me, but anyway, so he wants to do this. So he's going to be taking the lead on this one a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit different from the normal ones that I do. He's actually a corporate trainer, but he's also a musician and he does videos. And I actually did a video with him a few years ago, a video review I did of the Honda Accord, I think about 2.5 years ago or something like that. And he actually filmed and put that together for me. And I'll put the link below as well, along with all the other stuff. So this will be interesting. It'll be a little bit different. I hope you enjoy it. Please do make sure that you like, comment, and share this video. Make sure that you're subscribing to my channel, and of course hit that bell notification icon so that you get updated every time I upload a video. And make sure you follow me on all the social media channels. Very easy to find. Just search for hashtag Brown Car Guy across Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Also subscribe to browncarguy.com, and there's also a very special piece of content exclusively at a certain link, which I will tell you about at the end of this video. And yeah, let's see how this goes.
So, welcome back, guys, on the 21st episode of the Reframe podcast. Another one of the lockdown series here. That seems to be the trend now, that seems to be the norm now. And today we have automotive journalist, uh, commonly known as the Brown Car Guy, and overall a good friend and a great, you'll find out a very amusing personality, Mr. Shazad Sheikh. How's it going?
Hello, thanks for that introduction. I think you've bigged me up a little bit now. I'm a bit nervous about living up to those now. Yeah,
Well,
especially the amusing part. Oh gosh.
no, we've seen your videos. We've seen the way that you've managed your social media, and I must say, it's a very different kind of personality uh, that comes across when somebody just looks at you. And I like that. I mean, I like that energy that you have, and it shows in your reviews. It shows in the value of information that you give to people. That it shows all in that.
Thanks very much. No, I appreciate that. No, I think it's quite important to obviously, it's very interesting that you touched on the value of information because that's key. Because it's all very good having fun and, being
Yeah.
energetic and loud. But at the end of the day, if you're not giving anything that's useful, that's solid, and that's credible, then what's the point? So, yeah, I mean, I always call it a case of infotainment. It's trying to provide
Hmm.
information, but, in an entertaining and engaging manner. I mean, that's always what I've aimed to do, as you well know, because I remember we did a video together, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And I had a great time filming that one. It was what? It's been quite some time since we did that.
Probably a couple of years, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe just over 2 years ago. Yeah. It was the new Accord, then new Accord,
Yes,
I think. Yeah, yeah. No, that was
yes,
good
yes,
fun.
yes. Yeah. And I was surprised with the amount of patience that you had, because waiting and shooting in sunlight in such scorching heat and sun. It was really, I mean, it was really hot that day.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've done a lot of hot shoots. I mean, to be honest, it's like, I mean, obviously I do a lot of YouTube stuff,
Hmm.
for the last motoring Middle East and now at Brown Car Guy, we do a lot of YouTube stuff, but I have done TV as well. So I think
Hmm.
the patience comes from that because
Hmm.
because I was doing the car shows for the Autocrats, which went out on Fox
Yeah.
network in the MENA region. So so the Autocrats TV show, which is on the Fox MENA network, in which I do car reviews, and it's
Hmm.
still actually airing at the moment, well over a year after I did the last episode with them, and because people keep sending me images of themselves watching me on television, it's quite funny. But as you were saying, you were mentioning the patience, and I think that comes from there because and again, I've done shoots with those guys in 50 degrees heat in the
Hmm.
desert, wearing a tweed jacket and a tie, you know, and and obviously, and it's different for TV than it is for YouTube because YouTube, you get the
Right.
shot and you get away with it, and it's like
Yeah.
whatever, it's good enough. But for TV, even when it's good enough, it's not good
Hmm.
enough because then they
Right.
still do 2 or 3 more takes, from
True.
different angles, from different things. So I think the patience probably came from working with those guys, because that is a very, very long, laborious process, but good fun though, really, really good fun.
Yeah. And especially your specialty in being a one-take guy. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I mean, exactly. So when I'm doing my stuff, when I'm doing YouTube or this sort of thing or whatever it is, and even the sort of the BCG dailies that I do, which is sort of my take on the industry and what's happening in the car world, I generally do that in one go, one take, done. And yeah, normally I will try to do that, because I was actually I've just put up a chat now on it's gone live today. And it's one of my old buddies, Ian Cox, and I've done a lot of events, a lot of media events. He's normally on the other side, so he's sort of organizing or running media events. And he was having a go at me. He's like, oh, you took a long time to film one of the sessions that you were doing. And I said, well, it actually wasn't my fault, because I am normally known as that one-take guy. I normally do it, I'm done, But various things were happening, like other cars were passing in the background, or other journalists were coming in, and all kinds of stuff were happening. So I couldn't do it. But that's the thing. So in the TV stuff, even though I do the one take, normally I get it right. Sometimes I don't. That I do have a highlight of the episode that I did with the AMG Mercedes. And the idea was that they wanted me to do an introduction walking through, the flags on the beach in Dubai, when they put all the flags, So they wanted me to walk through there and do a long kind of intro to camera. And because of the flapping, because of the sound, because we'd written it, I think I put a clip up, actually. I think I did about 10 takes of that. It was ridiculous. But normally, like, even if I get the take right with those guys, I still have to do it again, because they want different angles and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, practice makes perfect, and you do find that the more times you do it, the better it gets. But yeah, it's nice to be able to bang it out in one go.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about the practice and patience bit, with reference to now everything shifting on YouTube, and specifically focusing because of the situation around us. The more content you can produce, the more practice you can get, and of course you get better with that. But then, how was it the first time, or when you began? I mean, you've been doing it for a very long time, but how was it? Did it come naturally to you? I mean, were you the one take guy right from the get go, or did it take practice? And then what were some things that you used to be patient, or lessons that you learned along the way?
The funny thing is, because a lot of people, so friends that I have from childhood who know me from back then, they see this persona that I now have online, and they're kind of like, who is that guy? Because believe it or not, I was quite shy and introverted, and and of course now you know me as I've done TV. I've done 6 years of radio in Dubai. I've done live shows. I've done the Ignition live shows at the Dubai Motor Show, and I deal with crowds, and actually I really enjoy it. But it took a while to sort of get over that. You sort of have to push yourself past that reticence, and I know it's very scary for a lot of people, and some people are never able to do it. But very often, what you do is you push yourself beyond it, and when you get there, if you find that you actually enjoy it and gain some satisfaction out of it, then it's easier to push past that level next time, and then the next time, and then the next time. It's that first one that's difficult. That first time where you'll stand in front of a crowd, or you'll stand in front of a camera. And you'll have.
I think even within a closed room where you're just talking to the camera for your YouTube.
Yeah,
I think that holds
true.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's a difference in attitude, isn't it? Because there are a lot of people that can talk in a closed room, but there's talking and then there's communicating. Yeah. And I think what I've always been about is communicating. Even as I started off as a writer, as a journalist, and I'm doing YouTubes and videos and audio and all the rest of it. But ultimately, it's all about communication, and it's about being able to communicate with your audience. And I think that's the key thing, is the ability to be able to understand that you're talking to somebody, whether that's one person or 1,000 people. You're talking to somebody. And I think it's that connection that's important, and that's what has to come across. So I think that's key. And that's one of the things to remember to get past that reticent, is that, okay, if you're in a crowded room and you're a little bit nervous about it, and we all are nervous, and you should be nervous, that's perfectly healthy. But if you imagine that crowded room is actually one person, you can actually manage that a little bit better, because then you go, right, well, actually, I'm talking to that one person, even though it may be, several thousand people. And I think that makes it easier. But, coming to doing it, I mean, you know, and actually, if you go onto my YouTube, I've put some playlists, and I've put some of my older videos. And the very first video I did was probably in the early 2000s. It was a Honda S2000
Uh-huh.
review, which I'd filmed here with a
I
crew.
love that car.
Yeah, it's an awesome machine. And at that
Mm.
time, it was still relatively new.
Yeah.
And we did that video as a pilot episode for potentially an Asian program, an Asian motoring program that we were
Mhm.
pitching to channels at the time. Unfortunately, it never got past that stage, but that was the very first time that I'd actually committed a car review to video.
Mhm. I have that problem. With me, I look for feedback, because in my day job, I'm a trainer, I'm a corporate trainer, and I'm usually in a room full of people, and I'm usually talking and communicating with them, and they are interacting with me. So when I put a camera in front of me, and it's not like the trouble of people have that tickle in their stomach when they look at a lens or something, or they get overwhelmed. It's not that for me, but the fact that I cannot get any feedback. So did you come across that issue, because you had also moved from writing articles then on to
Mm.
being on video, and then again looking into a lens with nobody bouncing that emotion off?
You know, it's funny you should say that, because actually, when you're a writer, it's quite a lonely exercise, you know.
Yeah.
And it's always quite wonderful when somebody says, "Oh, you know, I read your article or I read your
Mm.
stuff." You know, it's a great experience, because then that's the first opportunity you get. Oh my God, I can get some feedback. You know, somebody's actually read it.
Hmm.
Um, the funny thing is that I would say that since the advent of the internet and online media and digital media, both not only just video and audio, but actually also written media online,
Hmm.
it's that's progressed a lot, because it's been far easier to get interaction with an audience, to get feedback from an audience. You know, that's something that's changed substantially.
Right.
And I think that that's been a huge benefit to all of us in the content creation arena. um, because all of a sudden you get, I mean, if people are very quick to tell you when they don't like your stuff.
Hmm.
That's very, very quick. But it's even nicer when people take the time to tell you that they do like your stuff, because actually that's quite unusual. And
Hmm.
when you get that, you go, wow, that then you've really impacted somebody, that they've,
Right.
because like I said, people are quick to jump and say, that's rubbish, you're crap, you're this, you're that. They're quick to do that, but they're less quick to go, hey, that was really good, that was really
Yeah.
informative, I really enjoyed that, that really helped me. So every time you get that, um, you know, that really is a boon. You know, that's a
Hmm.
really good thing, and that really helps you. So I mean, yeah, you're right, feedback certainly helps, but there's all kinds of feedback. And I think one of the things you have to be very careful about is
Hmm.
understanding where the feedback is constructive and where
Hmm.
the feedback is vindictive, you know. So so you've got to be able to filter that out and not take everything at
True.
face value,
True.
you know. And you've got to understand, you know, where people are actually trying to help you,
Hmm.
and as opposed to where people are just being nasty, which is actually more often than not, sadly.
Hmm. Yeah. So how long were you in UAE?
Oh, in UAE, I was 13 years in UAE. Yeah, from
13 years.
2006 to the end of, so pretty much the beginning of 2006 to the end of 2018.
Hmm. Now that you've moved back to UK, it's a whole change of scenery. It's a whole change of the environment. And then we have this COVID-19 pandemic, which has literally bound everybody inside, indoors.
Yeah.
How's that affecting your journalism and your? I do see a lot more content, and of course, that's a positive side to it, that people are getting time to produce much more content. But then, of course, when you talk about car reviews, the real fun is actually going out and reviewing them, driving them, and giving important information to your listeners and viewers.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's been a little bit of an issue, because obviously once the lockdown happened,
Hmm.
all the cars that I had lined up to do reviews with, they got canned. They all got cancelled.
Right.
So fortunately, I still had a backlog, and I recently just put up a review of the BMW 330e. So I still have, I think, about 4 or 5 reviews in my bank, which I haven't
Hmm.
actually put out yet. So so fortunately, it was useful that I was working quite far ahead. So in that sense, I'm okay in terms of content, but
Mhm.
certainly it did cause a problem because, all of a sudden there were no cars. And even if there
Yeah,
were cars, you can't go anywhere and you can't
exactly.
test
Yeah,
them and you can't
yeah.
be outside. I mean, I've talked in some of the other videos I've done about the opportunities that,
Hmm.
as a petrol head, you're thinking, wow, there's empty roads out there. This is
Right.
awesome. But it's highly irresponsible because at the end of the day, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be staying at home,
Yeah.
to contain this virus. And also the other problem is that people go out, they speed, they
Hmm.
may have a crash, they may have a breakdown, they may have a problem. And then suddenly that means you're putting unnecessary extra drain on the resources of the medical health services or the rescue
Right.
services, and that's not fair in the time of when their needs are greater in terms of
Right.
a pandemic. So it's been really difficult. Things are beginning to ease up now a little bit here.
Hmm.
Still no cars, I think, because the delivery mechanism is not there yet. So
Yeah.
I
True.
don't know how long that's going to take. And of course,
Hmm.
work-wise, it's also been very difficult because a lot of work has dried up during this time, and we're freelancers, so we kind of rely
Hmm.
on work coming in. And when it doesn't, you're kind of like, oh my goodness, that's a bit of a problem. So all we
Yeah.
can do is still keep creating content and keep putting it out there, and and keep doing what we do. But yeah, fingers crossed that we're going to all get through this soon, and that hopefully there's light at the end of this
Hopefully,
coronavirus
yes.
tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah. We do hope and pray that everybody comes out of this uh, sooner than yesterday. But it's
Absolutely,
going to
yeah.
impact. Yeah, it's going to impact in a big way all the industries. And I was
Oh yeah.
recently thinking about it's not just the production of cars, the factories and all, but the small time workers like upholstery workers, small garages and workshops. They all depend on a daily wage basis, and they're all struggling right now. So that is why, yes. And post COVID, I think the entire world's landscape is changing dramatically. You know.
I think you're absolutely right. I think I mean, right now I look at the car industry a lot, and I'm trying to analyze what's going to happen, where is it going to, how is it going to shake out. We're looking at the aviation industry, and it's really bad. I
Oof,
mean, it's
yeah,
really gloomy.
yeah.
I mean, we have not just a couple of months ago that we were still arguing here about another runway at Heathrow, right?
Mm,
Where they were like, no, we need another runway because we're so busy. And now
right.
we have a situation where the second major airport in London is pretty much dead now, because this is Gatwick Airport I'm talking about, because
Mm,
Virgin Airlines have said they're pulling out their operations. British Airways is not sure they're even going to restart there again. So that's like we've gone from not having enough capacity to maybe shutting airports down. God
yeah.
forbid we're getting to that level. Conversely, looking at the car industry, it's a bit weirder because it could actually go two ways. Because there's
Hmm.
something very interesting that's happened during this lockdown. Certainly, the car industry has suffered. In April, sales were
Right.
down 97.3% in the UK. I think in some countries, I think in India, not a single car was sold. I think it's the same in Pakistan.
Right.
Not a single car was sold.
Right.
Factories were shut down, which for a car manufacturer, that's a major loss. To have a
Right.
factory that's not producing stuff. But some of them are restarting now. Some dealerships are opening. China is pretty much back up to speed again,
Mm,
and they're starting to shift metal again. Now, what I'm alluding to is the fact that there have been surveys that have come out recently that have said that people that traditionally didn't use a car, because the car has been demonized a lot over the last few
right.
years, and people have moved towards public transport, the more environmentally better option. But what the concern, of course, now is
Mm,
using public transport. I mean, right now in London, we have a situation
true.
where the government has told us, go back to work if you can, but don't
Mm,
use public transport, which in London
true.
is almost impossible.
Yeah.
And what's happened is that's put a lot of people in mind of, well, I should own a car. I should
Mm,
have a car, or I will need a car. So all of a
right.
sudden, you have this situation where people now that maybe have never thought about owning a car before.
Mm,
I worked it out the other day, and I put up some figures in the previous video. And I think there was 32 million cars in the UK.
hmm.
There's 41 million license holders. So that means there's 9 million people that don't actually have a car but
Ah,
do have a license.
right.
And the latest research says that over 50%, I think it was 56% of those people are now thinking of buying a car as soon as they come out of lockdown.
Right.
So that could be an increase. So if we're talking about 9 million people, we're talking about 4.5 million people will suddenly buy cars, or nearly 5 million people. So on the one hand, you're thinking, well, this is really bad for the car industry, and the car industry was having a tough time even before this all happened. To be honest, it hasn't been great for it. But all of a sudden, there may be an opportunity there. There may be an opportunity for them to actually literally make hay while the sun shines, because suddenly there could be a big market. I think the reality is that I think initially that will be a low value used car market. I think the used car market could well boom. And I think the more affordable cars, because we're talking young people suddenly wanting to buy cars, they're not going to buy premium metal. So to equate it to Dubai, we're talking maybe Toyota Yaris's rather than Lexus IS's, so that sort of thing. So, but I think that there may be some movement. I'm a little bit optimistic about it, but I guess I have to be.
No, I hope so. I hope so. You are. I'm also a fellow petrol head, and I love talking about cars. Let's segue into history of how did brown car guy come into being. Your recent video was a huge hit. I loved it. My son loved it. We watched it together. In fact,
this is the it's not easy being a brown car guy. That video.
Yes, that one. So so a little bit of that. Let's touch base on that.
Well, before we get into that, what did you enjoy about that video?
You see, the fact that, of course, the way that you presented all of the stories, and when are you going to get a real job, kind of thing, and there's often I have this discussion with my son, because he's also into cars and he has a YouTube channel, and we also talk about these things, because it's not easy, especially in this area now, for a couple of reasons. So there are two things that I always say: everybody wants to be a tech YouTuber, because they think they get to review amazing gadgets and they get to experience new technology, and everybody wants to be a petrol head and review cars because they get to drive fancy cars and all of that. So yes, the younger boys, younger generation gets attracted to it naturally, but then it's not easy. I mean, the whole process, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of you're going through a lot of phases. So when we were watching your video, we were discussing exactly those things. No,
it's I think there's two things to talk about here, and I'll touch on the second thing first, which is what you've initiated there. I obviously, as you can imagine, I get a lot of messages from young people, DMs, and I meet young people, and they're all like, "Wow, dude, you got the best job in the world. How do I do that?" And 9 times out of 10, my message is, "You don't," because and unfortunately. It's I don't want to be a downer, and I don't want to be that guy, but I tend to try and discourage people, because honestly speaking, as you said, it's extremely difficult to make a go of this. I mean, even as an influencer, as a YouTuber, you could maybe have a few years of a go at this, and maybe do something if you find that niche and you find an audience. But in the longer term, I mean, I've been doing this over 30 years now, and it's no easier. It's no easier at all. In fact, to be honest, in some ways, it was probably easier, 15, 20 years ago than it is now. It's actually got even tougher. So you look at somebody like me with my level of experience, skill set, and all that I bring to it, and I still struggle. And it's still hard to make this thing work, to make this thing count, to make a living. Quite frankly, it's not easy. You're driven by passion. So I always tell people, look, if you're interested in cars, that's great. Go and get a career in something else, right? Do engineering, do design, do marketing, do business, do sales, do something else. Do something that will give you something to do, that will give you a solid career choice. And then once you have that, if you still have the opportunity to do this and you can make a go of it, fine. But at least you've also got, a backup. That's important. And also, I say to some people who are just into cars, they're like, and this is the thing. It's like, why do you want to do this? What I do, which is basically a journalist in the arena of automotive journalism. Why do you want to do it? And if somebody says that I want to do it because I want to drive cool cars, then I'm like, well, then that's not the right reason. The reason I do this is because I am passionate about cars, but also I'm passionate about helping people. You know,
Right.
I'm passionate about advising people, about guiding them, about bringing them information, about conveying my experience to people, about putting them, virtually in the driving seat with me. This is
True.
what I'm passionate about doing. It's not just about driving cars. To be honest, I've
Right.
driven everything. It's not, that's not the driving force, so to speak, literally for me. But it's a bonus. But I'd say to people, well, if that's what you're about,
Hmm.
then you know what, go and do something that will earn you a lot of money. Go into the finance industry, become a consultant or something like that. And then
Right.
once you've got a bit of money, indulge your passions. Go and buy the car, go and do track days. You're going to
Yeah.
get far more satisfaction out of that than you
True.
will out of
True.
this, because this is a hard slog, and this is what people don't understand.
Hmm.
So that's that part of it. And then going back to the whole experience of a brown car guy. So brown car guy came about, obviously I left motoring Middle East, I moved back to the UK. And I think these days it's very important to have a personal brand. It's not
Right.
just enough to be, I'm a journalist, or I'm a freelance journalist, or I'm this. Or no, I think it's very important, especially if you're in a media-facing environment, which we are. I think it's very important to have that personal brand. So the brand that I'd left Motoring Middle East, so I no longer had a brand, because essentially I founded Motoring Middle East with my co-founder, Imtishan. Both of us were previously at Car Middle East magazine.
Right.
And I did 7 years of that, and he's still doing it. Motoring Middle East is still there, so do please everybody go check it out, subscribe, and all the rest of it, as well as the same
Still
with
providing
Brown
great
Car
value.
Guy. Yeah, he's still producing great content.
Yeah.
And but when I moved back to the UK, I couldn't be Middle East anymore, so I had to be me. And I had been using Car Guy and Brown Car Guy previously on my personal social media channels, so I decided to expand that into an actual brand. And people have said, what does it mean? I said, well, it's very simple. I'm brown and I'm a car guy. So, because they're like, does it mean you have a brown car? I'm like, no,
No.
no. It means
It's all
I'm
about the
brown.
punctuation.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like technically, there probably should be a comma in there,
Yeah.
but that doesn't scan very well when it comes to
Yeah.
social media. So that's where that came from. And then the recent video that you touched upon, I mean, that was just about the fact that, a lot of people, I talk to a lot of car people, when you start to talk to them, you realize that, their dad was into cars, or their uncle was into cars, or they had some sort of a grounding, or they lived near a racetrack or a showroom or something. For me, I had no background at all. Nobody in the periphery of my familial or social circle were at all interested in cars. My brother still doesn't have a driving license. This is the situation. My dad only drove because he had to, and he never liked it. He never actually liked it. So it's quite bizarre where that came from. And then, of course, becoming a car guy, in an environment where, it's not being supported, is hard enough, because people don't really understand your passion and what you're about. And B, then deciding to choose a career in media as an Asian guy, like I said, beta, when are you going to get a proper job?
Exactly.
For a long time, that's what I had to contend with, as I'm sure a lot of people still do.
Yeah. No, that's why the value that you gave in that video, along with your amusing personality, is what put the point across. So, my son, when he was watching that video, he was like, are you going to say the same thing to me as well? Beta, why am I going to get the real job? I said, I think so. Yes. But
at some point.
But the good thing is that you have time. You're in your teenagers. You can experiment. You can play around. And, you have time to do that. Let's talk a little bit about history of cars, because what's the point of a podcast with a petrol head if you don't talk cars? So for me, I think, and I'd love to have your view on it, is that the two most iconic and the most complete cars in general, what we call it people's car, I think has been the Mini and the Volkswagen Beetle. My personal opinion, the two most influential cars in terms of design, technology, and in overall in the modern industries has been the Beetle and my favorite Citroen DS.
Oh, beautiful! Yeah.
So I am in absolute love with that car.
Yeah.
So
no, the Citroen was a landmark car in the sense that it brought so much technological achievement. It suddenly took, until that point, a car was just an engine and four wheels, steering and maybe a brake if you were lucky. So that's about it. But that Citroen, it suddenly went, okay, you can have headlights that look round corners. You can have suspension that looks after itself. You know, that car is famous for saving
The president's life.
president's life, and it's actually in a movie as well. Is it
Yeah.
The Day of the Jackal? Is that the movie I'm thinking
The Jackal.
of? But anyways, yeah. So it's that movie, and that's a real incident that actually happened. You know, that where all the tires were shot out on the presidential limo, which was a Citroen DS. But because of the unique suspension of that car, the driver was still able to carry on and continue driving the car and get away from the danger.
True.
And I think, you know, the cars that you've mentioned are all landmark cars. They're all cars that are epochal in some way or another, where they've done something or they've achieved something that's never been done before. The Beetle was basically simple engineering, mass produced for a lot of people. But the real miracle of the Beetle, that not a lot of people talk about, maybe it's not politically correct, is the origin of the Beetle, because the Beetle was Hitler's car. You know, it's a car that Hitler wanted to have created. You know, and I think Mercedes were producing something, but you know, Ferdinand Porsche was doing this. Ferdinand Porsche, I think it was doing this. I may be wrong, but anyway, we'll correct it later on, I'm sure. But in the edit, they'll be fine. But anyway, if you want to look up the history, go Wikipedia. But anyway, but the point of the Beetle was that it was Hitler's car. And obviously, after the war, the funny thing is that it was actually the British that restarted the production of that car, because the British, I think it was a British major that went over and he was surveying what could be done, and he found the factory and he was like, oh, well, actually, here's the plans, here's the car, we can get that back up and running again. So the German car industry has got a British major to thank for its success to an extent. And then the other key dilemma they had with the Beetle was that when obviously America was a big market that was opening up after post-war and was very important to everybody, and of course the advertising agencies sat down in America. And they were like, how do we sell a Nazi car to Americans? You know, because that's fundamentally what they were facing. They were like, you know, we've just had a war with these people, and now the car's here, and Hitler himself had a hand in this car, and now we've got to sell it. You know, and ironically, it then becomes, you know, the symbol for peace, and you know, and the Volkswagen camper van then becomes the hippies' vehicle of choice, you know. So it's kind of weird how all that stuff happens. Similarly with the Mini was meant to be, Sir Alex Isigonis, who designed the Mini, he was told to create a car that was cheap to produce and practical, and that's exactly what he did. He had no intention of turning that car into a fashion icon, which is what it became, and B, a motorsport champion, which is also what it became. And both of these things will happen by chance. In terms of motorsport, because of the fundamental sound engineering that Alex Isigonis introduced in that car, which was basically lightweight, small compact body, wheel at each corner for incredible handling and great maneuverability. So suddenly you found people that were doing rallies, and this little Mini was taking on far bigger competition and beating them because it was just much more nimbler and more agile. And so you had that. And then on the other hand, you know, we were coming into the 60s, and London was a buzz with fashion. You had Carnaby Street, and you had all of this stuff. The mini skirt, you know, the myth is that mini skirt was named after the Mini, you know, or was inspired by the Mini. So, and then it became a fashion icon. And the Mini is a funny car because it sort of transcended. It was meant to be a people's car. It was meant to be a cheap, affordable car. But it transcended across the boundaries of age, of gender, and also of class. Because you had the likes of superstars like Peter Sellers and James Garner and the Beatles all buying Minis and driving them around. So, yeah, it's an incredibly iconic and legendary machine. All of those cars that you mentioned were brilliant machines. And I don't know if the likes Beatles, of those again.
Yeah, I've had a couple of Beetles and a couple of Vans, but I'm still waiting for a good Mini to come across.
Mini, to be honest, original Minis now are A, very hard to find, and B, if you do find them, very expensive.
Very expensive.
Because all of them have pretty much rotted away a lot. Because you know, I mean, after having said all that we just said, you know, saying how wonderful the Mini was, the reality is they weren't built very well. That's just the reality. They just were not built very well. So most of them have basically corroded and died and fallen apart and all the rest of it. So there's very few good ones that are left around. And this has just happened over the last decade and a half, really. So now if you find one, they're very valuable and they're well worth looking after. I know there's a big cult following in Sharjah. There is a UAE Mini Club who are very active. They love their classic minis. They do all kinds of customization to them, including the shorty and all of this sort of stuff. And they put Honda VTEC engines in there. It's crazy. Brilliant stuff that they do. But the reality is, like, if you can find an original Mini, you should hold on to it, because they're going to go up in value because there's so few left now.
Yeah, there were so many great cars that were produced in the 60s and 70s. I call it the as they say, music died in the year 2000. So real design and classic cars really died in the 70s. Do you see any cars of the recent years, maybe in the last couple of decades, which you foresee will have that level of iconic status going forward?
I think all cars will, because I think what happens is that it's a generational thing. So I mean, so now we're seeing, a few years ago we suddenly saw a boom in 80s cars. So the kind of cars that I grew up loving, the Audi Quattros, Lancia Deltas, early Supras, anything from that era was suddenly becoming cool. The Preludes, whatever.
Yeah. But they were really cool even in the times, in the 80s when they first came out. I mean, it's not like people started recognizing their class now. I remember when the Supra first came out, the MK1s and the RXs, the earlier the MK1 RX7, they were a killer from the get-go. And particularly, so Celica was there before the Supra. I remember my uncle used to have a Celica, and I grew up around a similar variant called the Toyota Truno. That's where I think my passion for cars sparked on, because I have a memory of my younger uncle when I was very young. We used to stay there as a daycare, when my mom used to work, and I used to see him always polishing and washing that particular car. And I was like, there's something special about this car. And then eventually I bought it off him. I had it till a couple of years ago with me. So
that was the AE86. The AE86.
No. That AE86 was the 85, 86 model. This was the 75 model.
Oh, right. Cool.
Right. This is called TE47.
But this is, see, you've touched on something there, you see, because it's very easy to take cars like Supra, like, Celica, like the Audi Quattro or the Lancia, or the Mini or whatever, and say, oh, well, they were always going to be classics. But then you have these other cars that, for example, I grew up in Saudi Arabia in the 80s, right? At the time, I didn't think much of them. But now, you show me a pristine Caprice Classic, Chevrolet Caprice Classic, and I'm going to lose my cool, because I'm going to whoa, I'm going to get super excited, So I think that also happens. It's like cars that maybe were taken for granted in their time, a Buick Park Avenue, for example, would be like, whoa, do you know what I mean? And so right now that would be a Cadillac Seville, all of these cars, like, at the time I was like, yeah, whatever, but now I'd be like, whoa, like I would rock. If I could find a two-door Caprice Classic in black, I would rock. You're picturing it, right?
Yeah. Those and the early 60s, 63, 64 Impala. Coupe was one of my favorite.
That thing just goes on forever. So I think that even today there are cars that you will look at in a few years' time and you will go, wow, that's a classic. That's now. And I think that your son will be looking back in 15, 20 years from now, and he'll be looking at cars from today, going, I wonder if I could still get one of those, or if I can get one, so this will happen, I think this happens with every generation. So like I said, the 80s cars were very cool a few years ago. They've started to appreciate in value, and now 90s cars are becoming classics and collectibles. So I think there will always be a phenomenon of classic cars, as long as we have cars and as long as we have petrol heads. So I think that's always going to be the case.
Right. But okay, so this decade, what are your favorite cars?
Favorite cars this decade? That's a very good question. I mean, there's always good cars around. What have I driven recently? Now you're really racking my brains. I like. I mean, the new Audi RS6 looks
Uh-huh.
fantastic. That
Hmm.
looks really, really good. Lots of the Range Rover Velar. I love that.
Ah.
That's a funny one, that, because
Yeah.
I didn't like it initially. That's a weird one. I didn't like it
Hmm.
initially, and then I spent time with the car, and I just fell in love with it. And then I was like, I don't want the big Range Rover. I don't want the
Hmm.
Sport. I want the
Hmm.
Velar because it just looks awesome. Um, Land Rover has come out with a new Defender, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of manufacturers are coming out with cars at the moment. A lot of the cars that are out there are getting better and better. The Mini is still there. The Beetle is dead. That's finally dead. Porsche 911
Yeah.
is still
That's a
going
sad one.
strong. That is a
Yeah.
sad one. Ferrari putting out good cars. I mean, the other problem that I have, even as a motoring journalist today, there's no such thing as a bad car, honestly, anymore. You even look at stuff coming from China now, and you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I
not
mean,
bad,
yeah, although very temporary, I'm sure.
Well, no,
Kind of like,
it depends, because don't forget. I mean, the likes of Geely or Geely. I'm
yeah.
never quite sure how that's pronounced, but
Yeah,
anyway,
same here.
they yeah, but they own the likes of Volvo. They have
Hmm.
a technology input from Mercedes because they have a share in Daimler-Benz. They've bought Proton and subsequently, therefore, bought Lotus. And Lotus now is on a renaissance with the Via, which is their electric 2,000
Hmm.
horsepower supercar that's going to
Oh
come
my
out,
God.
well, very, very soon. So suddenly you have a Chinese company that has leapfrogged decades of
Yes.
natural evolution and development
Yeah.
because they've just bought in the talent and they've bought in the
Yeah.
engineering expertise. So the last time I reviewed a Geely, and that was maybe 3 years ago,
Hmm.
even at that point, I was impressed with it. You could already start to see the influence of Volvo
Ah.
in that SUV. It was already at a point where, value for money, I would recommend it to people. I'd say, yeah, go check that out. It feels pretty solid for a Chinese car.
Hmm. I
So,
think,
yeah,
yeah, they need to work a little bit on the brand image. It's going to take a little bit
yeah,
of time because, at the end
yeah,
of the day, oh, you're driving a Geely or a Geely or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, that's always that. I mean, that was the case with the Koreans, if you think about it.
Yeah.
When Kia and Hyundai first emerged, I mean, you didn't lust after a Hyundai Pony, did you? You didn't lust after a
No
Hyundai
way.
Stellar.
Yeah.
But now you would look at the what's that Kia? The Kia Stinger GT, and you'd
Oh,
be like,
wow. That's a beautiful car.
see, look at the
I
reaction
know.
you just
I
had.
know.
Look
I
at that
know. I
reaction.
know.
I mean,
I know. They've,
just
they've
just
really come up a
just
long way. And
listen, just 10 years ago, if I had said Kia, I would never have got
yeah,
that reaction
agreed.
as I
Agreed.
just got from
100%.
you now.
100%. And the new Hyundai SUVs and all,
Yeah,
they are really, really good at, in the looks, and I've heard in quality as well.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, much
so
better. Really, really coming
it
along.
does
Yeah,
take
no,
some
really, really
time.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. Let's segue a little bit into, while the lessons that you learned while embarking on this massive and most difficult journey and transitioning into multiple different facets, from written media to radio to now television, now exclusively on YouTube,
Yeah.
lessons that you would want to give to the youth, because that's something that we want to give at the end of the show to people. It does not matter what they're trying to pursue, but the perseverance that they need to build into themselves, the patience, and the milestones that they need to look out for. What would you recommend new people coming into any field? I mean, just generally coming into practical life.
To be honest, it mirrors what I said earlier in this conversation about, you know, I guess there's two kinds of people in life, aren't there? Especially when you're young. You either pursue a line of logic and a sensible path that is going to get you somewhere where you want to go in terms of, financially secure, having a family, being responsible in your society. You're either going
Right.
to do that, and if you're doing that, then you're probably going for, the established professions, or shall I say
Right.
the established brown professions, the doctor, the accountant, the engineer,
Engineer,
all of
yes.
this. Yeah, wow, beta, very good. So you go down that route, or you're of the inclination that, what, I'm passionate about something and I'm going to pursue that thing. Whether
Mm.
it's like, I can see behind you, you're passionate about music. I can see a big painting behind you, whether you're passionate about art. My son he's doing media production at Coventry University here. So he's into magic. He performs magic, and he's into. And so with my children, I have two, a son and a daughter. You know, I don't want to be dictating to them. I'm not going to be that desi parent. I'm not going to be dictating to them what they should do. In fact, if anything, when my son Junaid wanted to do media production, I was trying to discourage him because I'm in media and I know how difficult it is. But he was like, no, but I'm focusing on video. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, if that's something that you want to do. So I think that, you know, as somebody who himself has always pursued his passion, my instinctual advice would be pursue your passion, make it count, do the best that you can. If I put my desi uncle hat on, then I'm like, you know, no, beta, find a good career and be sensible about it, you know. So it's kind of it's a really tricky thing, and I can understand the pros and cons of both, because times are tough. You know, the world is a hard place, and you have a situation like this virus situation that we're in now, and suddenly, for all those people like me who are out there trying to pursue their passions as a career, as a living, it becomes really difficult. It looks really hard. You know, whereas, you know, if you were a doctor right now, you'd be fine. Of course, you wouldn't be. I mean, obviously, you're on the front line, so respect to all the doctors and all the medical practitioners. But if you're an engineer, you'll still have a job. You know, people still need stuff fixing in building and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite difficult. If you're a businessman, you stop your business, but maybe you can continue it afterwards. So I don't know. It's always hard to advise people, because we live at a time now where things are changing very rapidly. You know, and it's very hard to predict. It's much tougher now than it was, for example, at the time of my parents' generation. You know, one of the stats that I often bring up that really scares me, in my lifetime, just in my lifetime, right? And I was born in 68. There you go. I've put it out there. That's my age. I was born in 68. In my lifetime, the population of the world has more than doubled. Doubled.
Right.
Wow. Imagine that. So again, when you look back at your parents and how difficult they had it, and you go, wow, how difficult do we have it now, and how difficult will our children have it? Because there's less and less out there, and more people, and we're all competing for the same thing. So we've got to look at where society is heading, where the future is heading, where the opportunities are, and there is no easy answer to that. So in a very roundabout way, to come back to your question, I think I'll fall back on my original response and say, pursue your passion, because really we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the right answer is. We could say,
I agree. I always say pursue your passion, but then be ready to go through those hardships.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have that in you, then yes, by all means, go ahead and pursue your passions. But you should be well prepared that there's going to be a lot of hardship before you see any kind of sunlight.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're absolutely right. And the other thing, of course, is the flip side of this. And again, just trying to put an optimistic spin on this, you know, as I always try and do, is that automation is widely regarded as something that's looming ahead, and it's going to take over a lot of things. You know, so a lot of existing jobs, you know, accountants we won't need, lawyers we may not need. You know, a lot of these things may be taken over. What's the one thing that computers can't do? Creativity
and creativity. Yes.
Emotions, creativity, innovation. They can't do that. That's what we can still do. Art, you know, they can't do that. Music.
100%.
There's been all these people trying to get the computers to come up with songs. Have you heard how bad that stuff?
Oh my God.
No,
100% true.
So I think that, to a large extent, the creativity side of humans is going to be enduring for a while yet. Hopefully.
Right. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for your time, Shehzad.
My pleasure.
Great episode. And I would love to keep on talking about cars. I mean, I could spend the whole day here. And I'm sure you would too.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
You know, in the spirit of keeping the episode listenable and enjoyable, let's end at that. That's a great one. But of course, we're gonna link everything, all your profiles, your YouTube channel, everything in the show notes. But how about you just give a little bit of your social media profile and links so that people can go and follow right now?
Well, it's very easy. I mean, you can find me on hashtag Brown Car Guy. You can see on my hat there, just hashtag Brown Car Guy on any channel, anywhere, and you'll find me. If you want the URLs, it's carguy.com, and YouTube is YouTube/Brown Carguy. It's very simple. Like you said, you put the links below, that'd be great. And I'll try and share this video. I may do my own version of this video and put your links on there as well. So hopefully everybody will be able to find both of us everywhere.
Yes, great. All the best. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And if you did, and I'm sure you did, and just share it across in your network. If you want to follow me, I'm on FarrukhTalks, FarrukhTalks on all channels. I'd love to connect with you. And go ahead and follow Shazad's channel, all his profiles. He's a great guy. You love talking to him. I met him a couple of years ago, and he's been a good friend, and it's been a great pleasure knowing him. So with that, we'll close this episode off. We'll see you in the next one.
Wow, that was quite a session, wasn't it? But I hope you found that interesting. We covered a lot of ground in there, and we covered a lot about my journey actually in there, so maybe a little bit more than I was anticipating. But I hope you found that interesting. Hope you found that enjoyable. Please do let me know what you thought of that in the comments below and elsewhere and all wherever you may be watching this. Thanks so much for watching. Like I said, please make sure that you're subscribing, like, share, comment, all the rest of it. Hit that bell notification icon so that you will get updates every time I upload a video. Make sure you follow me on all the social media channels. Just search for #BrownCarGuy. It's very easy. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Of course, also subscribe to browncarguy.com, and that exclusive piece of content that I told you about at the beginning of this video, you will find on patreon.com/Shazad Sheikh. And there I have done my kind of parody sequel to the original Cannonball Run movie. It's a lot of fun. Go check it out. Let me know what you thought of it. And please do support me if you can. If not, just please keep liking, sharing, and subscribing. That's really helpful. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.